Hello, everyone. I am Yenni, and I am running for Worcester City Council District 5. And this is my first address like this, calling it a new podcast that I'm running. So over the course of the next hour or so, we'll have some information on what the city has been up to this week, information that's come out, as well as a little bit of a look at why I'm running now and my brush with death back in 2019. So I've moved to Worcester in 2013. My husband's been here his whole life, and I have fallen in love with the city. There is so much good here and so much change that is happening that we really need to be careful about how that change is going on and what we're doing with it. We need to make sure that we're taking into account all of the changes that are going to come in the future. We have no idea what automation is going to bring on a detailed level, but the changes that are coming need us to be technologically aware. And unfortunately, the current city council does not have a solid enough awareness of technology to really prepare us for that future. We have also a great need for doing work on our accessibility. The city's website is not accessible to people who use screen readers. Our sidewalks are a mess. Where there are any, they're like roller coasters, especially in District 5. We're constantly told the city's improving their accessibility, but it definitely doesn't look like it on this side of town. That's a big thing that we need to change. We also need to make sure that people are aware of what the status of different aspects of repairs are. The city released the update for this year's plans to upgrade sidewalks and roads, and one of the items on there was from 1997. There's absolutely no reason that it should take over 20 years for a bit of sidewalk to be repaired and replaced. And at the same time, there was no way for people who live here, residents, to check and see what that status is over time to pressure the city council. We need a public view into what repairs are going to be happening, when they're going to be happening, what the status of them is. It'll also allow people to prepare for road work and sidewalk work that's going to be happening that'll disrupt their lives, because they can set up a notification saying, if I'm on this street, where is the where and when are the repairs going to happen? The next issue that we have to deal with is the ability for people to get around the city, not just with sidewalks and roads, but our buses as well. Our bus system needs a overhaul in terms of where our routes are going. We have many parts of the city that are not able to walk a reasonable distance to get on a bus line. And when they do get on a bus line, they have to go all the way down to the hub and then all the way back out again, instead of being able to traverse in a more interconnected system rather than the hub and spoke model we have without a wheel. We need some kind of system that goes all the way around the city so that people can transfer between lines without having to go all the way down to the hub. We also need to make sure that we are doing right by our kids. The change where we're pulling out the school resource officers is absolutely fantastic, but we need to make sure that we're taking care of our students' mental health. We need more mental health professionals in the schools, more so than just the budget change that removing the school officers will provide. Especially due to COVID, our students and our young people are having major mental health issues, and we are seeing an uptick in violence in students, as well as kids just not having anywhere to go, anything to do. That needs to be a community change. We're building a skate park. We have But we at the same time have places like Skylight that have closed because of not being able to generate the right kind of revenue. So we need to protect the places that young people can go that are not bars, that are wholesome and healthy for people to be involved in. And as we build those things, we will hopefully be able to decrease the amount of crime and violence by giving people a sense of community that they can be involved with on a regular basis. So that's a little bit about what I hope to do on the city council over the next so many weeks. We'll go into a little bit more of it in detail. I'm going to go into bits of my policy plans and stances on different issues as we go forward. This is going to be a hopefully weekly event, so I will definitely be seeing you on a regular basis here. You can tune in on Saturdays, 1 p.m. Although next week will be off. I have a training program that I'm going to. So I will not hold my meet and greet or my podcast next week. But this week, after this is over at 2 o'clock, you'll be able to join me on my open meet and greet hours to talk to me about any of the issues that I'm talking about today, or anything else that you'd like to chat about. I would love to know from my constituents what you feel like your city needs to be doing for you. And it's less about what I personally want to see. I'm representing the district, and I need to make sure I understand what the district wants to be able to represent it appropriately. So I'm going to switch over into discussing what's happened with the city council this week. The person that I have on the call with me today is Cory. He is my deputy campaign manager. And we'll be discussing a bit more about our brushes with death and what makes this so important for me to do now rather than at some distant point in the future. So this week, the city published the top 500 salary wages that city employees have earned over the course of the 2020 year. And of those 500 positions, of the top 100 positions, only 3 are women and only 10 are not police officers or police members. That is a gross situation for us to be in as a city. We need to make sure that we are having people represented that are actually a major part of our community. And the amount of paid detail and overtime that the police officers are getting is a big portion of the overall budget. And we need to pressure the state to move away from requiring the police to do things like traffic and parking enforcement. We need to make sure that the police officers are doing the jobs that they're trained for. And unfortunately, the amount of training that police officers get is, in my opinion, not sufficient. We need to make sure that we're not having police officers have less training than somebody who's cutting our hair. Cosmetology and barber school require more hours than the police have to go through training. And if somebody's going to be holding a gun, they should be getting more training than someone who's holding a pair of scissors or clippers. There's so much more danger involved, and making sure that people are handling the position safely, we have to make sure that they have enough training. We can also decrease a lot of the overages on the police budget by pulling out things that they don't need to be the one doing. We shouldn't have police officers making mental health calls. We shouldn't have police officers doing the traffic and around construction sites, just making sure that the flow of traffic happens appropriately. It's a waste of their time, in my opinion. They should be focused on what their job is actually supposed to be about. And I realize that that's not going to necessarily be popular with a lot of police officers, but change is coming and change is needed. So while we have this past year only 3 people who are women and only 10 people who are not police officers, a majority of that shift, by pulling out a lot of that overtime and paid detail, will automatically shift it so that we have more representation of non-police and women in that top 100 salary range. And I'm not sure if Cory has any questions for me about that issue. Give an opening for Cory to chime in.
No, I don't really have, it makes sense to me. I mean, basically you just want more equity in terms of the people that are getting paid the most, which I don't have an issue with, and more representation of women and not guys, cis guys.
Yep.
I'm assuming.
Probably mostly.
Not that.
Yeah.
Not that we can't get to a point where it's not all cis guys, but you know, that's where we live. That's the world we live in.
Yep.
In terms of who's highly overrepresented in who earns and who, you know, is in positions of power and right. And we also need to be paying people who aren't just in police or paramilitary things, but making sure that other professions wherever the city is paying them are also getting fair wages. And that it's not just mostly going to cover, you know, police and overtime. And, you know, do we really need an officer to stand there and wave cars through?
Yeah, exactly.
I think
not. So then the next thing that I wanted to bring up was the school committee. So right now, well, earlier this week, the city decided to go along with what the lawsuit that they're facing from Worcester Interfaith wants. So Worcester Interfaith brought a suit against the city for how the electoral system does not represent the makeup of our city. Right now, the estimated population of BIPOC people in the city is 44%. We have in our schools 43.1% of students identify as Latinx and 16.9% identify as Black. Meanwhile, our school committee, for a majority of Worcester's history, has been almost entirely white. We need to make sure that people are represented, because without representation on the school committee, things are not going to be able to change for the better for our BIPOC students. One of the major things that goes into this, as far as the electoral side of it goes, right now the school committee is elected completely at large, and what this change will be, we're not entirely sure yet. The city has not made any particular movements or announcements on that front. I personally would like to see the city implement a similar system to how the city council is elected, where there's district seats as well as at-large seats. It's not a perfect system. It definitely will not cure the problem because of how the districts are currently distributed, but it will open it up to the potential of there being more people of color on the school committee, because the more regional aspects of the city will be voting, which I think will be a major improvement to help the students that need it and help make sure that the city is being responsible about our BIPOC population. Yeah, so there's that one. I don't know if Cory, if you want to like chime in anytime, you're more than welcome. So
but what we're talking about is just representation. You want to make sure that the student, body group, the group that represents the students and isn't just a bunch of white people. We are way over represented. We don't need help, having white people, middle class and wealthy white people's voices in schools really is whack and busted, and we need to just open it up. And of course, a system that has mostly had white older people is going to continue to try to ensure that it's mostly just white, cis older people, which is not, it's, less than change. So hopefully there will be people on the school board that actually, and in meetings and representing the school, that actually look like the students, because otherwise it's like, who's really being served? White kids. Well, white kids already have a lot of privilege beyond even just talking about white privilege. So let's do some thinking about that and actually make some changes, so that we're not talking about this in a year and it's still just a bunch of pale, stale white people who are overrepresented, and not just the curriculum, so we're talking about like the sort of committees and the meetings and the power structure of the parents, but like in the curriculum, we're overrepresented. In in the statistics that we base, I have a master's in education, and the statistics we base tests on, we're overrepresented. We are overrepresented in the faces, in the hallways, everywhere. Like how we norm what we teach, it's all mostly based on white people. So it's like we need to stop being so overrepresented and acknowledge that the only way we do that is we use our privilege to say enough is a frick enough.
Yep, definitely enough is enough.
We are harming students.
We are, definitely. There's a major overrepresentation of white history. Most people who went through American school systems have no idea about what has gone on in Africa in terms of the history of Africa, the history of the Middle East, the history of Asia. So much is focused on white European history that me being very interested in Japanese history per se, where in school I was reading the Tale of the Heike and the Tale of the Genji and all of these other historical documents related to Japan. And when I went to submit a paper on it, the teacher didn't even know enough to be able to grade it and had to do research. And I think that that's an absolute crime. I think it is doing a major disservice, not just to people who are of color or other descent than white, understanding their own history. Because the European history that we teach is not everything. And the same thing happens in classrooms across the country, not just here in Worcester. And I think that there's a shift that needs to happen in terms of what's taught in the history books, what examples are used in different books. I just saw an example somewhere in the South had a question of something about a slave owner and a slave, and what the slave owner would do with the slave. It's extremely insensitive for those questions to be utilized, especially in a math class.
Well, that's just racist.
Yeah,
That is straight up no,
completely
and
racist.
let's not fuck. I'm sorry for cursing, but let's not fuck around. Like that's just like you don't. That is not something that should be in a textbook. In that, not only is that inappropriate, but it shows how ineffectual that. I would not trust any other history content from a textbook that would. And I love history, maybe not as much as you, but like I took a bunch of AP. I always was fascinated about human suffering and how we could live in a world where we would actively decide to harm whole classes of people because of race or because of they were born in a certain, you know, province or part of the country and were marginalized for religious beliefs or whatever. It's like, if you want that type of learning, you basically have to do it yourself. You're going to get the sugar-coated version. We're always the heroes, drape an American flag over everything. We've never, you know, interned Japanese citizens, you know. We don't get that like hard, that we're not always the white hat heroes, and that Europe and America, that we're not the center of the world, and that we can't be if we really value people's differences. If we don't value their differences and just value white people, then sure, you know, our textbooks are great. But if we actually want to honor, you know, how many students aren't white and don't see themselves in their education or their educational experience, then we need to really get on that, because it's not like we're not capable of it. It's just we're still norming everything to white people, and that is always gonna set up this divide where your educational system, if you're not white, is not set up for you, and it's not going to be. And so it's like, how do we actually plan? Because I think those intentions are great, but like, what can we really do now so that it feels like we're always having these conversations?
I feel like it's also a shift that we need to make in terms of the way the classes are taught. So when people go like, oh, we need to add more BIPOC history, let's make a Black history class. No, we don't need to separate it out. History is history. It should all be taught together. Unfortunately, the way that our testing systems are set up, that it's just not possible for teachers to spend the time doing that.
Well, but also if you have like a month where like all the rest of the year we're glorifying like Europe and all the great things that we've done settling America and blah, blah, blah. And then you have February, which is the shortest month of the year, which is like really how much we value, you know, diversity. So you have like a couple units that you do on Black History Month. You put some, you know, hero figures of American culture, are so many up on the wall, but that can't counteract it. The rest of the year, it's pale and stale and inaccurate, and we sugarcoat things. But like, I think if we were more honest about history and really talked about it, it would be better for us as a nation. This hyper Americanism, ultra nationalism is terrifies me as someone who loves history and sort of knows where, when it's that polarized, how dangerous that can be.
Yeah. I mean, I know next to nothing about the history of South America. And I, right now, don't have the time to research it or really get into that. But I would have loved to learn what happened on the different continents over history rather than having to research it myself. It's a shame that we're failing students that much. But,
well, and like, we're students of privilege, so it's like, imagine like if you're being failed student, like, oh my God, like that's scary, but like even more so.
Oh, you're cutting out.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
You know, if you're a Black, Indigenous, you know, student, how much we're saying like and who's left, who's, you know, it's,
you came through pretty
just
broken with that.
Okay, so all I'm trying to say here is, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, I can now. No.
Without, oh man, without going on, students like, what they get for an education, especially around history, is just, it's really sad, and it really is othering. Like, we can do so much better, and, you know, use the right, you know, I'm a slice of white bread, but I believe that we can do better, and that if, as white people, we use our privilege to say, this system needs to change and it can't just be words and we're going to do the work, then it will change because we have power there. And it's like, well, if you have that not white power, but the privilege of, that other students of color, don't, then you should use it. Not white power, never white power, but like have white privilege, might as well use it. Because I feel like that's when we talk about these, in the 60s and things, white people really did have that power to help turn the tide. And it wasn't the labor of white people, but it was just like some people saying, okay, I can't stand by this as a white person. And I'm going to actually like be supportive and not just say it, but do it.
Yep.
Like, we got to get there.
And there's a similar issue with the LGBT QIA plus community and the underrepresentation of that as well in the schools, but I'm not going to get into that today.
Well, we can talk about that some other,
yeah.
I mean, it doesn't seem like just in the schools though, also, or,
I got also, and then you cut out.
Can you hear me now?
Every single time you cut out, I can hear you. Can you hear me now? I think I'm going to shift to the next one.
Yeah.
So the next topic that I was going to bring up is the Durham Bus Company contract. The school committee voted to hold them accountable for a breach of contract. There definitely was a breach of contract because they were supposed to supply 138 bus drivers. They were only able to staff 102, now 104. So yes, that is a breach of contract. Yes, COVID was a major player in that. They lost drivers to working on other jobs because they didn't have the job with the bus company available to them. And they needed to train more people on the bus system to be drivers for it. And that takes time. They have been very transparent and very upfront about these difficulties that they're having. I feel like we need to make sure that the breach of contract solution, whatever ends up coming out of that, is aware of and informed by the fact that COVID got in the way of it in a significant way, and that it's not entirely Durham's fault. They've been a decent company for us in the past. We need to understand that we're going to be potentially doing the shift to having the buses in-house. I don't remember exactly what the status on that was. It had been talked about last year. And I think that the changes that are needed there in terms of increasing the staff level and increasing the number of bus drivers we have is key to making sure that students get to school on time, that the routes are efficient, and that people are able to stay as socially distant as they're supposed to, rather than having to crowd the buses a bit more than we'd like. So it's kind of an issue that needs to be tackled, but we need to be understanding of the fact that COVID's a large part of it. The next issue is on the Green Worcester Plan. So that just came through the Urban Innovation Technology Climate Committee of the City Council. It's one of the standing committees. And they voted to pass it up to the City Council for approval. That is going to make the city have an outline for what changes we want to make in the future. There's a FAQ that's going to be part of it for people to be able to parse through it without having to necessarily read through the whole thing, a little bit of summaries. And I look forward to that information coming out. The plan itself is a very long document, and obviously people tend to not read very long documents. I fall on the side of Sunrise Worcester. I do not think that the plan goes far enough, fast enough. We have 10 years, well, less than 9 years, because that 10-year came out last year, to kind of halt the effects of climate change, of pollution that is causing climate change. Otherwise, we are going to see major issues in the future in terms of our climate. We're already seeing that. We had snow this week, and today's back up to 57. We have had a massive amount of snowfall this winter. For a lot of it, we were the top in the country. I think we still held that in terms of snowfall over this winter. And we're in a drought already, which honestly, we need to be careful about that. Water is a finite resource. It is going to be the next oil. It is going to have wars fought over it, especially in areas that are not technologically advanced enough or financially in a position to solve the problem themselves. Things like desalination plants and being able to bring water up from the water table in areas that it is very deep, such as sub-Saharan Africa. They're going to have major problems there with water access. It's a global issue that is happening, and we need to prepare for that as well. Our reservoirs are constantly hitting drought. I don't know how many of you have noticed, but we have drought for a majority of the time that I've been here in Worcester. And it's interesting to see how many people still flout that, especially here on the west side. We need to be very careful about how much water we're using in our yards to wash our cars, major issues like that. But we also need to hold the big companies accountable. And that's a nationwide issue. But Worcester and Massachusetts need to focus on that a lot more, and neither the city nor the state is taking our green plans far enough. I look forward to seeing what comes up on the city council when this comes to the floor, not next week, but the week after. Next week, we have school vacation week, so there's not going to be any city meetings. So all of the agendas and such are going to be coming out next week for the following week. And I don't have much detail information on the Green Worcester plan in terms of what I would like to see more of. I think that the Sunrise Movement plan is a lot more well-rounded, a lot more forward-focused. So I think that the city should have taken a lot more of that into account, and a lot more of the speed at which we need to change things to make sure that we're doing right by future generations and preserving the planet for them. The planet is not given to us by our parents, it's on loan from our children. And that's a saying that stuck with me. I went to the Natural History Museum in Manhattan a lot when I was a child, and that was on one of the walls outside of the Blue Whale Room. I think that people need to recognize that a little bit more, that we need to leave a livable planet to the future generations. Also out of that meeting came the open data policy. It involves how we're going to be publishing data on opendata.worcesterma.gov. It is a portal for all of the different information that the city has put up there so far. Obviously, there's a lot of information that's still in the works. But on there, you can find things like fire incidents, police incidents, birth and death records, as well as a number of the studies and surveys that the city has done over the past so many years. So I definitely strongly recommend taking a look at that open data portal. There's a wealth of information there that I look forward to being expanded and inclusive of more information that the city holds. But at the same time, the city has been a little bit slow in rolling out some of the other changes data-wise that they're planning on doing. At the meeting in December for the Urban Technology and Innovation Climate Committee, there was a announcement from the city that there was going to be a change to the city council page on the website, where it would have things like the agendas, the meeting times, the attachments for the agendas all in one place rather than having to hunt all over the website for them. And I'm hopeful that that is going to come out in the near future, but it was promised in February and there hasn't been any updates since then on it. I have asked Wally, who's the chairperson, who's also our district counselor here in District 5 for now, about it, and still waiting on an update from the city about it. He's waiting on that update as well, as far as I'm aware. So that's a pending issue that I think will definitely increase accessibility and increase engagement. At the same time, it needs to happen rather than being delayed for almost 2 months without update to the committee that it was announced at. So I feel like there's an accountability aspect that needs to be held. The city needs to be held to that accountability standard. As a former project manager in the game development world, I am all for making sure that deadlines and budgets are adhered to. There are plenty of projects that I've been on that have gone over budget, and then I came on the team and the project kind of came back on track. That was one of the major projects that I was on as an intern, even in Manhattan, that was over budget and overdue by 6 months at that point, when it was supposed to only be a 4-month project. And I feel a lot of similarity to that with this, because there's so much that the city's working on, and the staffing levels, because of the hiring freeze due to COVID, haven't helped things either. As we've seen the city council meetings where the Facebook feed goes down 3 times during the course of the meeting. We need to make sure that we have people that are able to handle doing those jobs, and we need to make sure that we're still, even though there's a hiring freeze, we still need to make sure that stuff is getting done. I look forward to that hiring freeze ending in hopefully the near future, so that we can bring on people that'll help make these projects go a little bit smoother and faster. So that is that's the updates that I have from the city end this week. I don't know if Cory wanted to say anything about any of the ones that I didn't let him chime in on. Okay. Might be having connection issues again, I'm not sure. But yeah, so I think we're gonna go over into what I'm calling story time now. We've got about 10 minutes before my meet and greet time is supposed to be. This took up a little bit more time than I thought, so I'm probably gonna extend into the meet and greet time a little bit. If you want to join me for the meet and greet, you can go to my website. On the events page, there's a link that you can join the call with. It's also on Facebook as a event on the Facebook page. So on with story time. So I've been dealing with a lot of health problems. I have a condition called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a connective tissue disorder that is genetic. It's not a solvable thing. I have hypermobile joints, which result in a lot of dislocations and problems with hypermobility causing pain. At 33, although I'm not supposed to do the party tricks, I still do them. And at 33, I can still fit both feet behind my head at the same time. And that is a ridiculous amount of flexibility that causes no end of problems for me. If I try and open up a bottle that is a little bit too tight, my hand will pop and it'll be in pain for hours. I have to ice regularly, heat regularly. And so as part of that condition, there's a lot of other internal problems with the muscles and ligaments not staying necessarily in place, but also with my organs. I was undiagnosed for many, many years. I'm still awaiting the official diagnosis on Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, but the symptomology and my orthopedic surgeon, chiropractor, and primary care physician all agree that it's that. Just waiting on an appointment with a geneticist who will actually follow the diagnostic guidelines as they stand. The person that I saw originally a few years ago that was is the head of genetics at UMass. She said that I did not have it because I didn't have the skin elasticity. I'm obese with a chronic dehydration problem, so my skin elasticity isn't there. And the skin elasticity is also not on the diagnostic criteria anymore. That is an outdated criteria because they've found that a lot of people with the hypermobile form of Ehlers-Danlos do not have the extra stretchy skin. So I'm looking for a new geneticist that isn't going to utilize old, outdated diagnostic criteria. And at the same time, when she told me that I didn't have it, I asked her, is there anything else that you would recommend that I look into, or any other doctors that you think I should go see? And she didn't respond in the affirmative or negative or anything, just said, I hope you have a wonderful afternoon, and left the room. It was extremely disheartening to have that happen because it left me wondering what could be the cause of this, what is wrong. And that tied into how I almost died in 2019. So I have had undiagnosed endometriosis for a very long time. When I was in high school, I was told I had cystic ovaries, which to me didn't necessarily mean anything, especially not at the time. And over the course of the past so many years, that was back in 2005 that I got that diagnosis. And it has progressed further and further and caused a significant amount of pain when I have my monthly. And it has majorly impacted my life. I go down for about 2 days with major pain problems. I have passed out from that pain. And when I've told doctors that, they've been like, oh, everyone's got period pain. Meh, meh, meh. Just completely dismissing the pain that I was in. And so over time, I thought that it was just a thing that I had to deal with until my husband and I started looking to have children. And when we couldn't get pregnant for a number of years, we went to a fertility specialist who checked me out and found that I had so much endometriosis tissue in my abdomen that it had spread to the outside of my bladder and my abdominal walls. So we decided that as part of attempting to fix the fertility issue, as well as trying to relieve a lot of the pain that I was having for quality of life, that we would go in and do a endometriosis ablatement or removal. And while I was in, it was supposed to be a day surgery where I would go home after. I came out of surgery with a major cut from my belly button to my groin, where they had to open me up in a speedy fashion so that I would not bleed out internally. There was an issue when they were taking the endometriosis off of my abdominal wall, where one of my major arteries, the iliac, through the right side of my abdomen, developed a tear. My veins and arteries are very what they call friable. They break fairly easily. That's also tied to the Ehlers-Danlos. And if I had the Ehlers-Danlos official diagnosis, that might have been flagged, and we may have been able to avoid my near-death experience. As I came out of surgery and they told me what happened and that I was going to have to stay overnight, I was like, okay, how am I going to handle this with my business? I owned my pet care business at the time, and thankfully, my absolutely fantastic and amazing employee, DJ, basically dropped what he was doing to help out and took on the couple of clients that I'd been seeing that he wasn't already seeing, to be able to make sure that all of the pets were being taken care of while I was laid up. The following morning, I developed a clot in that artery. They had to whisk me off to another emergency surgery. They almost medevaced me to Boston, but decided to take me from Memorial to the university campus's Trauma 1 Center. And my father, who's an anesthesiologist, chief medical officer, said that that decision to bring me to a Trauma 1 operating room probably saved my life. Over the course of the 2 surgeries I had, and my recovery, I had 5 pints of blood that I had to be transfused with. And I now have a stent where that tear was, because as they were pulling the balloon out after getting the clot out, the blood vessel collapsed. So I am now permanently on the baby aspirin that people with stents have to, or cardiac issues have to take. And that experience changed a lot for me. But I'm going to let Cory go into what happened with him, and then we can talk about the effect that those near-death experiences have on us and how it's changed how our outlooks look at the future. So, Cory, I don't know if you want to take it away.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Cool. For me, about 3 weeks ago, I had to have emergency surgery, but before that, the middle of last month, I had a hysterectomy. I'm a trans guy. I really didn't need to have a reproductive system that really I wasn't going to use to need, and it caused me a lot of pain. So once they said I could have that surgery, it was a no-brainer. But unfortunately, during the process of that surgery, my colon got nicked while they were using a cauterizing tool, and they did not catch it. So they just sewed me back up and sent me on my way. I stayed with friends, and then that Saturday I had terrible pain in my shoulder. I paged the surgeon, and we thought it might be a standard complication where the air that they put in your stomach for the camera was still in my body, but that turned out not to be true, because the next night I woke up in the worst pain. If pain ever told you that you were gonna die, this was the type of pain that I woke up in. I had done my church skit, I had went to bed, and when I woke up, I knew that I had to get myself to the hospital, but it literally took me 30 minutes to get out of bed. And I'm talking like I was already at the edge of the bed to be able to get off of the bed to drive myself. But so basically, then they informed me. I cried for 17 hours. This is the very short version of this. But basically, between 1 in the morning when I went into UMass, then they transferred me over to Mass General. I was in the worst pain. I can't even describe to you what it was like. It transcended feeling. I just could not stop crying, because whatever they were giving me to numb it didn't even touch it. And so I went into emergency surgery, which was a little weird, having just done a planned surgery where there's like 4 surgeons standing around. You have no idea who they are. They just knocked me out, and they patched up the hole and gave me a stoma, which is, it's basically, it saves your life, but you basically have to wear a pouch. You know, it was not what I was expecting. Although I have since bought at least 10 different stoma covers of different designs, because if I have to have a stoma, it's gonna stoma.
Oh, you cut out.
Knew your story, but I didn't have a story.
You cut out for a bit in the middle there. Just between the getting
Yeah.
the packs for the wrap covers for the stoma. Oh, dang it. Well, I'll go into a little bit of mine while he comes back on. So one of the major things that came out of having this near-death experience, I kind of threw myself into volunteering on the Yang campaign. I told the heads of the volunteer arm, the other YGROs, Yang Gang regional organizers, to put me to work, and they did. I became a YGRO, the regional organizer for New England, managed 5 states. And about a month and a half after my near brush with death, my grandfather passed away. I thankfully was able to see him. I had healed enough to drive down to New York before he passed. I was there, I think, 2 weekends before, which was a really hard situation to go through after having my own brush with death. There was a lot of feelings that I really didn't let myself feel until I was dealing with his death as well. And that whole experience, oh man, that whole experience was life-changing. I came out of it with the feeling of, if not now, when? The combination of both situations made me realize that life is short, life is finite, and we're only put on this earth to do what we can in the time that we have. And I didn't want to put it off anymore. I decided that I was going to run for city council. Before that, all of that happened, but I had been planning on going through having kids, then going on a committee of some kind, like the Parks, Recreation, and Cemetery Committee, and then going from there to school committee, and then from there to city council to hopefully affect change. And I had a conversation in passing with Harriet Chandler, our state senator. She probably has no recollection of this, but it was at a Women Information Network event that the chamber was holding, and she was a speaker at, and she told me to not worry about having to, quote unquote, put in my dues as a person going into office, that I should just go for it. So between that and the if not now, when attitude that I had, I decided that obviously 2019 was not going to happen because it was September already. Signatures had been due already. So I was going to run this year. And I had geared up to be able to run against Matt Wally. Had to shift gears when he decided that he's going to run at large. But the emotions that drove that decision are still with me. The feeling of not necessarily having as much time as I thought, having that incident where I could have died. They couldn't get my blood pressure under control for a long period of time afterwards. Spent from my Monday surgery through Friday in the hospital in the cardiac unit. And the doctors were constantly saying, like, oh, this is like a rare thing, and do you mind if the residents come in and that we help them learn from it? And I'm like, yeah, of course, anytime. I grew up hanging out with residents in my father's hospital, so I had no problem with them coming in and learning from me. But it was a really interesting experience because frequently I've been told by doctors that I need to donate my body to medical science so people can learn from me after I die. And here I was with a near-death experience and still doing that. So it's a little bit of a light thing that came out of it, that I was able to basically help the students learn more about things like Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and complications that can happen in surgery that are unintended but could very well cost someone their life. I'm still dealing with the fact that I nearly died. I'm still dealing with the fact that my body is not capable of carrying children. Um, I am not allowed to have any cosmetic or unnecessary surgeries because of the risk that I present due to that artery that broke, basically. And the biggest hit to me of it, besides the potentially me dying, was that it basically sealed the fate on my fertility. And had doctors caught it and listened to me back in high school, back in college, when I complained about the pain and when I complained about the fact that I was passing out from the pain, that I couldn't drive when I was having it because I was afraid that I was going to crash, something could have been done then, and I might have been able to have biological children. With endometriosis, there is a very, uh, they don't want to give people who have endometriosis, especially as bad as mine, the drugs that would be needed to collect the eggs. So I won't even be able to have biological children through a surrogate, which is hard when you've always pictured yourself becoming a mother. But I very much look forward to having children someday, hopefully in the near future, whether that's adoption or surrogacy. We haven't really figured that out yet, but between the two of those, I was really knocked out, and I still haven't. I think I still haven't even fully processed it. Um, it's not a simple thing to process, as other people that have had near-death experiences can understand. And I know, Cory, yours is very recent, so I'm not sure what your thoughts on that are.
I mean, it's pretty much been it's a dichotomy of two things, like all the attitude of like being alive, but like short term, given that mine was a surgical mistake and all the like medical stuff I've had to deal with, it's like sweet and sour. The sweet is I'm alive, I'm grateful. The sour is there's just so many things from this one complication that when you think of it, you don't think of like, months down the line, I have all these appointments and all these things. But it's like, on the other hand, like having an ostomy pouch saved my life. Without having a stoma, I would not be alive. So even when it's hard, it's like it makes things easier. And even like things like at church, people are talking about times where in their lives they regretted, like they knew something and they couldn't say it because they were nervous. And like none of that stuff really bothers me right now. Like it just sort of takes all the lower level stuff and it just sort of completely wiped it off the table for me. It's like in some ways I'm less intense because like the worst possible thing already basically happened. I just almost died. It was very real. Needing to have the surgery, how far along my body had gone with a hole in it without it being detected. The statistics on the surgery that saved my life were about 30% of chance of people don't die from it. Those were the statistics
Yeah.
that I was able to find. And it's like, well, damn, that really, it does put everything. It's like, I'm not like some magical, like there's like all these movies about people, they have a near death experience and they become like a superhero, like guru, like, and I'm most of the time, I'm just so tired all the time from the medical side of it and not being able to sleep well, not really being able to eat because of my stomach, being very temperamental. But so it's like, it's neither. It's like, I'm not aspiring to be like a symbol of hope or like this great person, because I think also we try to be like, the surgeon was like, we'll get you back to the way we I'm not a mug. You don't just drop me, glue me back together, and if the coffee still holds in it, you're good. Like, you know,
Yeah.
and to say possible
Oh, you're breaking up again.
uh, broke me, they fixed me, and
I think what Cory's trying to say is that they being broken apart like this is not able to be put back together in the same way. It's not the same thing. I'm not sure what he was trying to get to next on that. I like to kind of compare it to the way that people who are, well, the common practice in Japan of when something breaks, you put it back together, and then the where those joints are is goldened, because nothing can ever go back to the way it was once it's broken, but you can make something new out of something that was broken. So the cracks and the scars are what make us who we are. I don't know if Cory had anything that he'd like to say to wrap things up. You there? I don't know. Okay. Well, I hope to see some of you at my meet and greet hours, and join us. If you find me on Facebook, it's Vote Yenni. So it's facebook.com/Vote Yenni. Or you can go to yenniforcouncil.com. I think
it's the other side.
this side?
Yep.
This side.
Yes, it's that side. You're just pointing at air on the other side.
The whole like reflected system confuses me.
It's okay. I mean, I'm dyslexic, so I'm not better. I'm sorry. It's like it's literally never cut out this much. I think it just did this just for our first podcast, just to add some extra.
Yep. Some extra.
Well, I hope that people do join for your meet and greet and like hang out with us. We also have some volunteer spots. If you would like to volunteer and join us on Team Vote Yenni, you could really use your support.
On both Twitter and Facebook, I have a post that's pinned with all of the volunteer options and phone banking schedule. I'll be posting the next week's phone banking schedule this evening. So I hope you'll join us for some of that. It's bit.ly.com/ yeah, it's in the image. And then on either my website, yenniforcouncil.com/events, you can find the link to the meet and greet hours, or on the Facebook event. And I hope to see you all soon. And I will see you guys in 2 weeks for the next issue, the next installment of this podcast. So I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon with the weather that is warming back up again. Have a good day.